That night, as I sat at home reading through the legal papers, I thought about everything I had lost: my marriage, my son, my trust in the people who had once been closest to me. I had rebuilt the company from the ground up, but I hadn't done it alone. Marco had been by my side, and the team we had assembled was beginning to show the results of our hard work. But this was different. For the first time, I was looking at something that could truly define my future. The power to shape everything was in my hands, but I knew it wouldn't come without sacrifice. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, staring out at the city lights. I had always been someone who fought for what I wanted, even when it seemed impossible. And now I had to decide if I was willing to fight for something even bigger, something that could change everything. Tomorrow I would make my choice. The days after I left Anderson and Kane law firm felt like a whirlwind. The weight of the decision, the gravity of the situation, hung over me like a dark cloud. The legal documents outlining the merger clause and the potential for me to take full control of the company seemed to stare at me from my desk. Every time I looked at them, I felt a sense of urgency, a need to make a decision. But what was the right choice? The company was thriving again. Yes, I had worked hard to get it back on track. But the truth was, there were still cracks in the foundation. Those cracks had been covered up for years by Clarissa and Bianca. Now, they were exposed, and if I didn't act quickly, they would swallow everything I had worked for. Taking control wasn't just about the company, it was about me, my future. It was about reclaiming my life. The company was my life. It always had been, even when I had tried to distance myself from it. But the business wasn't just about numbers or contracts. It was about legacy. It was about building something that would outlast me. I had watched as others, namely Clarissa, had taken that legacy for granted, and I couldn't let that continue. But there was also something else at play here. It wasn't just the company, it was my sense of self. Could I really do this on my own? Could I take full control and not lose sight of what was important? Or would I become just another businessman driven by power and success, forgetting everything that had gotten me here in the first place? I spent the following days in a haze, pacing the apartment, reading the contract over and over again. I thought about the board meeting, about the moment I had decided to take back control of my life. That moment felt like a lifetime ago. I wasn't the same man who had walked into that meeting room, defeated and broken. No, I had changed. I had learned to stand up for myself. But now I had to decide whether I was ready to fully embrace that change. I called Marco late one night, my mind still spinning from the weight of it all. He had been by my side through every step of this journey, and I knew he was the one person I could trust to give me honest advice. "Marco," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I need your help. I'm at a crossroads here. I have the opportunity to take full control of the company, legally, but I'm not sure I'm ready for it. I've spent so long trying to rebuild everything, and now it feels like it could all crumble if I make the wrong move." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Marco knew me better than anyone, and I could hear the wheels turning in his head. "You've been preparing for this moment for a long time, Julian," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "You've already done the hardest part. You've rebuilt yourself, your confidence, your purpose. Now it's time to take that next step. You've earned the right to take control of this company, and you're not just doing it for the business, you're doing it for yourself. You've already let go of the past. This is about the future, and trust me, you're ready for it." His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I had been questioning myself, doubting whether I was ready, but Marco was right. I had already made it through the hardest part. I had fought for this moment, for my future. I couldn't back down now. The company, my life, it was all on the line. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of the challenges ahead. I had faced the worst and come out the other side stronger. The next day I sat in my office reviewing the merger clause one last time. The document in front of me felt like a crossroads. If I signed it, everything would change. I would take control, but I would also be responsible for the future of the company, for every decision, every move. There would be no more hiding, no more running from the past. But there was one thing I knew for sure: I was ready for it. I had spent years hiding behind the idea that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't deserve to lead. I had let Clarissa's family, their expectations, dictate my life. But that was over now. With one deep breath, I signed the document. The pen moved across the paper, a simple motion that felt like a declaration of independence. I wasn't just signing for the company, I was signing for my future, the future that I was finally ready to claim. As I put the pen down, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't an immediate sense of triumph. It wasn't a rush of excitement, but it was a quiet peace, a peace that came from knowing I had made the right choice. I had taken control of my destiny. But as I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city, I knew that this was just the beginning. The work was only starting. There would be challenges ahead. There would be people who didn't believe in me, people who wanted to see me fail. But that didn't matter anymore. I had already faced the worst. Now I was building something better. For the first time in a long time, I could see the future clearly. It wasn't about what had happened to me. It wasn't about the betrayal, the hurt, or the anger. It was about the life I was creating for myself, a life where I made the decisions, where I was in control. The phone buzzed on my desk, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Marco. I smiled as I answered the call. "You did it," he said, his voice full of excitement. "You took the first step." "Julian, now let's take the next one. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community." I looked out at the city once more, the horizon stretching out before me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could conquer whatever came next. The following months brought more change than I could have anticipated. The decision to take control of the company wasn't an easy one, and it wasn't without its challenges. I had made the choice to rebuild, not just the business, but myself. But the truth is, it wasn't just the business that needed work. It was the relationships that had crumbled in the wake of betrayal. The trust I had once placed in those around me had been shattered, and trust was not something easily repaired. At first, I thought the hardest part would be the work, the restructuring of the company, reestablishing client relationships, and rebuilding the brand from the ground up. But in truth, the hardest part was learning how to trust again, how to let people in without fear of being let down. I spent most of my days in the office, buried in meetings, running numbers, and overseeing new projects. The days seemed to blur together, but every once in a while, when I stopped to catch my breath, I could see the growth we were experiencing. The clients who had been on the fence began to return, and the ones who had stayed loyal were thrilled with the changes we had made. There was a renewed energy within the company, a fire that had been absent for years, but there was still something missing. It wasn't until a late afternoon when I was walking through the office after hours that I realized what it was. The office, once bustling with activity, was eerily quiet. People had gone home. The computers were off, and the hum of conversation had died down. I walked into the conference room, where Marco was hunched over his desk, going over some reports. "You know you're still here," I said, surprised. "I thought you'd gone home by now." Marco looked up, his tired eyes meeting mine. "Had to finish a few things," he said, shrugging. "But you look like you could use a break. Come on, sit. What's on your mind?" I sat across from him, leaning back in my chair. "The company's doing well, Marco. Things are growing, and we're on track. But there's still something missing. I'm missing something. I don't know if it's the way we're doing things, or if it's me, but there's this emptiness." Marco sat back, his eyes thoughtful. "I get it. You're still trying to fill the hole from the past. And no matter how much you build, no matter how many clients you bring in, or how many new deals you sign, it's not going to fill that space." His words hit me harder than I expected. He was right. I had been so focused on rebuilding the company, on proving to myself that I could make it without Clarissa, that I hadn't realized I was still trying to fill the void left by her. I had spent so much time pretending I didn't need anyone, pretending I didn't care about what I had lost. But it was there. The hole. The absence. I ran a hand through my hair, staring out the window as the sun began to set. "I've been avoiding it," I said quietly. "I've been avoiding the truth. I thought I could bury it under work. But I can't." Marco gave me a knowing look. "You can't fix everything, Julian. Not by yourself. And that's okay. You've been carrying this burden for so long, but you don't have to carry it alone anymore." I let out a sigh, feeling the weight of his words. I had spent so long believing that I had to do everything on my own, that I couldn't rely on anyone else. But Marco was right. I didn't have to carry this alone, and I didn't have to fix everything by myself. It wasn't just the company that needed fixing. It was me. I had been so focused on trying to prove something to myself, to everyone else, that I had forgotten what really mattered. The relationships I had neglected, the people I had pushed away. I had to face those parts of myself if I wanted to truly move forward. I picked up my phone and sent a message to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Someone who had always been there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. It was time to reconnect, to rebuild the relationships I had let fall apart. I sent the message, not knowing what would come next, but knowing that it was the right thing to do. The future wasn't just about business. It was about healing, about learning to trust again, about learning to accept that I didn't have to do everything alone. The next morning, I got a response. It was from my old friend Thomas, the one person who had always believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. We hadn't spoken in months, but the message was simple. Let's meet. I've been thinking about you. We need to talk. I smiled as I read the message. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. I wasn't sure what was going to happen in the meeting, but I knew one thing. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that boardroom months ago, defeated and broken. I was someone new, someone who had learned how to live with the pain, how to carry it without letting it define me. That afternoon, I met Thomas at a small cafe in the city. As soon as I saw him, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. He hadn't changed. He still had that same easy smile, the same confident air about him. "Julian," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "It's good to see you, man. I've missed you." We sat down at a table, and as I looked at him, I realized how much I had missed this. The ease of friendship, the simplicity of just being myself around someone who understood me. "It's been too long," I said, laughing softly. "I've been caught up in everything. The company, trying to rebuild, trying to make everything perfect. But I think I've been avoiding what really matters." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The relationships. The people who matter. I've been so focused on fixing the company that I've neglected everything else. I've been running from the things I'm afraid of." Thomas nodded, understanding. "It's not about being perfect, Julian. It's about being real. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to admit when we need help, when we need someone to lean on. You're not alone in this." As we sat there, catching up and laughing about old memories, I felt a shift. The emptiness that had once consumed me seemed a little less heavy. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I was finally beginning to swim. The weeks passed by in a blur, each day merging into the next. I had started to see the fruits of my hard work. The company was growing. New clients, new deals, and most importantly, a new vision for the future had begun to solidify. But even as the business continued to take shape, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was I making the right decisions? Was I truly ready for the responsibility that came with leading the company and my life in a new direction? I couldn't afford to let those doubts consume me. The truth was, I was doing this on my own terms now. The anger, the hurt from the past, had become something I could manage. I didn't let it drive my decisions anymore. But every so often, I would catch myself thinking about Clarissa, about the choices she had made, about how her absence had left an undeniable void in my life. I hadn't heard from her since that conversation months ago. I hadn't expected to. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. But still, there was a part of me that wished we could have reconciled, that we could have found a way to move forward. But I knew deep down that it wasn't possible. Not anymore. She had hurt me in ways I couldn't forget, and I was no longer the person who needed to be saved. One evening, as I sat in my office going over new contracts and checking in with my team, I received a call that I didn't expect. It was from Claire's mother, Diane. I hadn't heard from her since everything had fallen apart, and the sight of her name on the phone made my heart skip a beat. I hesitated before answering. "Diane?" My voice was guarded, uncertain. What could she possibly want? "Julian," Diane's voice was soft, almost fragile. "I know you're probably not interested in hearing from me, but I need to speak with you. It's about Clarissa." My heart tightened in my chest. "What about her?" I asked, though I was afraid of what I might hear. Diane took a deep breath on the other end. "She's struggling, Julian. She's not the same person you knew. She's reached out to me, and I think she's finally beginning to understand the gravity of everything she's done. I don't know what she expects, but I do know that she regrets how things ended between you two. She hasn't been the same since. I leaned back in my chair trying to process what Diane was saying. Clarissa had been so determined to keep her distance, to move on without any regard for the consequences. And now, Diane was telling me that she was struggling, that she regretted it. I closed my eyes trying to calm the storm inside me. I can't do this. Diane, I said quietly, I can't go back. I can't forgive her for what she did, for abandoning me, for abandoning Noah. I've spent months healing, building a life without her, without any of that. Diane was silent for a moment before speaking again. I understand, Julian. I don't expect you to forgive her, but maybe you could at least listen to her, for closure, for yourself. She needs to hear that you're okay, that you've moved on. I think it's something she needs to hear from you, whether you want to or not. Her words struck me harder than I expected. Closure. It had been something I'd been chasing for so long, but I had never truly allowed myself to accept it. Maybe I needed to hear it too. Maybe I needed to confront it, once and for all, so I could let go. I'll think about it, I said, my voice thick with emotion I didn't want to acknowledge. But I can't promise anything. The call ended shortly after, and I sat in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I didn't want to confront Clarissa again. I didn't want to open up that wound. But what was I really holding on to? Was it pride? Was it anger? Or was it fear? Fear that if I let go, if I truly moved on, I would lose the last piece of her that still mattered to me. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling of Diane's call. I spent the entire morning going through documents, but my mind kept wandering back to that conversation. Should I meet Clarissa? What would I say to her? Was there any point to it? I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't care about the outcome. I had already made peace with the fact that I would never get back what I had with her. But was there any harm in giving closure to this chapter? That afternoon, I called Diane back. I'll meet her, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But it's just for closure. I need to hear what she has to say, and then I need to move on. Diane's relief was evident. Thank you, Julian. I think this will help her more than you know. The meeting was set for the next day. The next day, I stood outside the coffee shop where we had agreed to meet. It was a quiet place, the kind of cafe where time seemed to slow down, a place for reflection. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I had already made the decision to face her. I wasn't going to run anymore. I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future. Clarissa arrived a few minutes later, her expression a mix of apprehension and something else, something I hadn't seen in her eyes for a long time. Regret. She walked toward me slowly, and I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a strange sense of relief that this moment was finally happening. Julian, she said quietly as she sat down across from me, I'm sorry. I know I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. The way I left, the way I treated you, the way I treated Noah. I looked at her, the words almost choking me. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also knew that the damage was done. We had already crossed this line, and there was no going back. I don't need you to apologize, Clarissa, I said, my voice calm but firm. What's done is done, but I'm not the same person who needed your approval, who needed your love. I'm building my own life now, with or without you, and that's something I need you to understand. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I'm so sorry, Julian. I'll never be able to make up for it, but I just want you to know that I'm sorry. For a moment, we just sat there, the silence between us heavy with the weight of everything we had lost. And then finally I stood up. I've let go, Clarissa, I said quietly, and I think it's time for you to let go too. She nodded, and as I walked away, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't about forgiving her. It wasn't about rekindling anything. It was about freeing myself from the chains of the past, from the anger and the hurt that had kept me locked in place for too long. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking towards something worth fighting for. My future, my company, my life, and that was enough. The days that followed my meeting with Clarissa were filled with an unexpected sense of relief. I had walked away from that conversation with the closure I had longed for, the kind of closure that allowed me to finally put the past behind me. It wasn't about forgiving her, and it certainly wasn't about rekindling what we had. It was about freeing myself from the bitterness, from the anger, and from the lingering hope that one day things would be different. I had spent so many months haunted by the idea that somehow, somewhere, there was still a chance for redemption. I had clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, Clarissa would realize the damage she had done and come running back. But I was done with that. I was done waiting for something that was never going to come. The company was doing well, better than I had imagined. The investors were impressed, the clients were pleased with the changes we had made, and we were steadily climbing back to a place of stability. But more than that, I was seeing the company become something that reflected me, my vision, my work ethic, and the values I had worked so hard to uphold. Marco had been invaluable in helping me steer this ship back on course, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Every decision, every move I made was now mine. And while that was daunting, it also gave me a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. This was my legacy, my future. But as I sat in my office late one night, reviewing some documents and feeling the rush of accomplishment, I was reminded of something, someone else. Noah, my son. I hadn't forgotten him, of course. His presence had been a shadow in my heart ever since he had passed. But now in this moment of triumph, I found myself missing him in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to grieve openly. The tears came suddenly, catching me off guard, but they weren't filled with the anger or the regret that had plagued me before. They were filled with love, with memories of the boy who had once been my everything. I thought back to the days before the chaos, when Noah was still with us. I remembered the way he would laugh, the way his eyes would light up when I came home. I remembered the simple joy of spending time with him, the quiet moments of connection that we had shared. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't bring him back. But in that moment, I realized something powerful. I could honor his memory by living fully, by embracing the life I still had left. He had taught me that, how to love, how to laugh, how to appreciate the small moments in life. As I sat there in my office, the weight of the past finally starting to lift, I realized that I wasn't just rebuilding the company anymore. I was rebuilding myself piece by piece, and I was doing it for Noah, for the man I had become, and for the man I wanted to be. The next morning, I stood in front of the window in my office, looking out at the city below. The skyline stretched out before me, endless and full of possibility. The city had always been a symbol of ambition, of dreams made real, but it was more than that now. It was a symbol of my resilience, my ability to move forward, no matter what. I didn't know what the future held, no one did, but I knew one thing. I was ready for it. I was ready to face whatever came next, with strength, with purpose, and with the unwavering belief that I could handle whatever life threw my way. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marco. "Got a new proposal for you. It's a big one. Let's talk." I smiled as I read the message. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about rebuilding everything I had lost and everything I had gained. It was about forging a future that was mine, one that wasn't defined by the failures of the past, but by the success I had worked so hard for. I put the phone down and stood up from my desk. The future was waiting, and I was no longer afraid. I walked out of my office, heading toward the next chapter of my life, a chapter where I was in control, a chapter where I would no longer be held back by the mistakes of others, a chapter where the past could no longer dictate my future. And as I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. For the first time in a long time, I was walking towards something, not away from it. I had finally broken free from the chains that had held me back for so long. I was free. And that, more than anything, was the greatest gift I could give myself. If you find this story interesting and want to see more touching, tense, but meaningful situations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel today. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share this story with your friends and remember to like the video so we can stay motivated to bring you more great and meaningful content. Thank you for watching and supporting us.